It's nice to meet you, Amy. I know we spoke a little bit by phone about today's visit, but I'm glad we can meet in person today. And you had mentioned some things on the phone regarding recent concerns, and I would definitely love to start wherever you feel comfortable.
Okay. The biggest thing that I'm dealing with right now is I struggle with codependency and understanding the fine line between what's codependent and what's not. And it gets really fuzzy for me. I do attend a church group that we talk about it often, so I have friends to talk about it with, but I'm mostly codependent with my youngest son. He suffers from depression and anxiety, and we've had a very codependent relationship probably his whole life. And he's recently recovered from drugs and alcohol for the past 2 years, but I don't know that because I don't think I see things really clearly when it comes to him. And it's affecting my personal life. I can't focus. I worry about him excessively. And my husband says that there's patterns I should be recognizing in his behavior, and I'm not. So I really don't know what to do. And I'm worried about whether or not he has suicidal issues. He tells me he's exaggerating, but then he says things that seem suicidal to me, and I'm not sure whether or not to act on them or not.
Can I ask you what the most concerning statement that you've heard from him in the past maybe month has been?
Just recently is, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this alone, because he broke up with his girlfriend. He cries openly and excessively, and he's going to be 26, and he doesn't want to be alone. And he'll call me late at night and ask me if he can come over because he can't be alone, and that he's afraid to be, or he'll text me and tell me that he's afraid to be alone. But won't specifically tell me what he's afraid of, but I think I'm supposed to understand that he's afraid of himself.
Oh, okay. He lives by himself?
He rents a room in a home with a couple of friends.
Okay. So then it sounds like I can certainly understand and appreciate more so what you're describing about your concern regarding, sounds like both your relationship to him and vice versa, and things that you're hearing from him directly and that you've been hearing from him for some time. And it sounds like another part is, where does it go from where it's at currently, and what are ways to be involved and intervene, and at the same time, to go back to the phrase you mentioned, codependency, being involved and intervening without necessarily fostering a certain kind of relationship that you're perhaps not wanting to foster. In what ways have you, and I definitely like to ask you more about just how that has been in the past couple of months, but in what ways have you noticed your life being affected? You mentioned, I think generally a few moments ago personally, I was just curious to ask you a little bit more about in what ways you find the impact to be on your life and how that's been.
When I'm aware of his struggles, it immediately zaps my energy, my joy, and my peace. I can't focus on anything other than him getting or feeling better. And I kind of slip into my own, not necessarily depression, but isolation. And just kind of like I'm watching a Spanish soap opera right now, and I'll go away. I'm in Colombia with their problems, and I'm not dealing with mine because I don't really know exactly how to. I do reach out and I talk to some of my other step study leaders and my other church friends, and we support each other and pray for each other and things like that, but ultimately I need to make the decision on what to do. I just noticed a big change to where I start feeling better, and my husband and I are living alone now with no kids, no mother-in-law, nobody, and for the first time ever, we're enjoying our relationship. as a married couple, single married couple.
Yeah.
And I'm affecting that by being short, not paying as much attention to him, and being withdrawn.
Your
Fearful, very fearful for my son.
Okay. In your mind, what do you see as possibly the worst case scenario given what you've described and how things have been for your son?
Him taking his life.
Okay. And that's certainly, of course, a grave situation, understandable. Have you, how else, excuse me, how else do you find things being affected either in your day-to-day life or just even internally, how you feel from one week to the next?
That's a big one because I've been working on my codependency for years, and my change has been gradual, very gradual. It's almost like I didn't know anything about my codependency. So raising my children for a long time as a single mom, I didn't really exist other than to provide for them. So when I had first started getting some counsel for my codependency, I didn't even have a favorite color or my favorite food. I could tell you what everybody else's was, but I had no idea what my needs even were. So it's been really gradual for me, but and finding out, I'm understanding myself better as to what my interests are, what my likes are, what makes me happy, what doesn't. Finally, after years, understanding what boundaries actually are and how they actually work. And so I've recently set some boundaries with my son because he moved out of state for a couple months and then he came back because of drama, girlfriend problems. And I'm actually struggling right now with holding those boundaries. And there was only 3. One was his girlfriend can't come to the house, he can't move back into the house, and that I wouldn't talk to him about his relationship. And I'm faltering a little bit on that last one. I'm trying not to get details and talk to him about it, just be with him so he's not alone and keep tabs on him so I know that he's okay.
So that from what it sounds like, the maintenance of boundaries means he's going to be doing addressing parts of his struggle on his own, and there are parts that you're there as his mother to support him with, but that you're finding that you'd like for that to be more delineated so that it's clear as to who's doing what, and so that, as you pointed out, your increased interest in various activities, and just as you said, like the example of the favorite color and that connection with self, as that's increased, it sounds like there's been even more of perhaps maybe more of a push to have this sort of, if we can call it, healthy separation between you and your son, and you're finding how that's manifesting in like day-to-day reality. And you're also mentioning that there are times where it feels like, to use your word, it falters. There are times where you'd like for that to be more kind of separated, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was going pretty well until he came back. And even now, thinking if I take him to a hospital or I call 911 and say, this person needs to be checked on, they would take him to a hospital. He would lose his job. And when he came out of the hospital, where would he live? Back with me, when that's not. I'm not sure. I can't figure this out for myself. I'm at a position where I'm like, just tell me what to do. And I notice that that's what my son does. Just tell me what to do. So I'm feeling overloaded with the things that I can actually see now. And then I'm isolating because I can't deal with all the things that I see that I didn't even see before.
Oh, okay. Okay, that I kind of just processed that for a moment. So it sounds like, is it fair to say that, excuse me, things feel somewhat stuck, but it sounds like given the current situation, the only solution for being stuck is to have someone create an unstuck situation, or for someone else to provide that solution rather than that, regardless of who we might be talking about, whether if there's a feeling that you're having of feeling stuck, or if your son's having a feeling of feeling stuck, that the current option seems to be, well, I can be unstuck, but that means somebody's got to facilitate that, or somebody's got to somehow do the unstucking, if I can put it that way. Somehow.
Yeah. And I think I've been kind of hoping that my husband would call for him, so that he would be the one making the decision and things would change.
Mm.
But I feel like that's manipulatively codependent of me.
For him to go ahead and be the one to make the call.
Yeah.
How do you feel that that might change things if he were to step in and to, it sounds like what you're saying is to take maybe even more of a role with your
It would be
sons.
a relief.
Okay.
It would be a relief.
So is there also a question of boundaries in terms of what's his role regarding your son's well-being and what your husband could be doing or is not doing, and perhaps looking for clarification on that, or is that?
I've pushed a lot on that relationship. He's their stepfather. He's been with them for many, many years, but he was never really good with them. But he's really good with them now that they're all adults. And, well, not all of them, but they get along really well. And this son, the youngest son that is struggling right now, would cling to him and hang on every word he said. But my husband feels insecure, and he blames me that he doesn't want to overstep me, or that he doesn't feel comfortable doing that, but I know it's an excuse because he doesn't feel confident enough to do it himself. And we've had that conversation, and then he doesn't want to talk about it. But I've given my permission. I've said if that's what you need, you have my full permission to do or say whatever you want. I mean, that's your guys' relationship, and I've tried to step back and say, why don't you have a bigger relationship with him now? Because they'll talk, and my son will lighten up, and just, he wants him, he needs him, he always has, and my husband's a little more willing now to do that, but not as much as my son needs right now.
From what you're describing, that your husband's expressing to you that there's something in the way of, even though you're saying, please, by all means, there's something in the way of that that's not allowing for him to perhaps get even more involved in. Okay, and that could be something at some point, perhaps, if your husband might be willing to come in, that's something that we could discuss further, because it sounds like there might be, and oftentimes, as you know, this might be said within any family system, different dynamics that are happening. So that's definitely raising my curiosity as far as, well, on the one hand, your husband is involved to an extent, the relationships among him and your children are in a kind of positive place, and then at the same time, there's still some sort of hesitation, or there's some sort of pushback as far as getting more involved, especially for matters that you're saying are concerning and can, if we were to take it to that farthest, thing, or say life and death almost, even just very serious matters that, and you also added that from your perspective, that would be something perhaps that you would like to see more of, or that would be, as you said, relief.
Absolutely.
So there's a value placed on his involvement, or the level of involvement. What is, how is your life in terms of, given everything that's going on in terms of self-care, and just how you're, I mean, certainly it goes without saying, a very strong person to be able to manage all these different things happening, and at the same time, are there things that you find helpful just as far as managing everything and coping with just whatever stressors might be going on?
I'm being very intentional about keeping my routine. Coming to work, not calling in sick. Making sure to smile and to be friendly. When I come to work, I can kind of put it aside a little bit. But it would hinge on a lot whether or not my son texts me. If I was texting him and he couldn't, and he didn't text me back for a long period of time, I don't know. But cooking, diving into my little soap opera, painting, sketching, things that I do around the house, housework. A lot of after work activities that I do, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. So I'm just being very intentional to not interrupt my schedule.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. So as you said, a routine. There are things that they're just really just people are doing, treat themselves, and just to allow for unwinding and for just having downtime, as you said, painting and sketching, so there's that creative side of cooking. Okay, that sounds great. One thing I forgot to ask earlier, and not necessarily perhaps the next point, but it might be interesting or helpful at some point if your son could also attend a session, or if that's something that you think you'd feel comfortable with, or perhaps you could be open to.
Depending on his mood, I would, one day would be absolutely not. I'm not gonna do anything to extend, you know, my whatever here, and then one mood could be like, okay, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, then we can maybe just monitor that and to see when we might be able to, if that might be a time we might be able to perhaps have him be here on one of those times.
That would be amazing.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I'm thinking that given everything you said, perhaps if we could, just kind of so far what you described, I thought maybe just to mention a few things about my understanding of, just to, so that I can make sure that I understand clearly what you mentioned. So it sounds like your relationship with your son, given where he's at right now, how things are going for him, how that's affected your life, where you're kind of seeing things are currently, and if there are parts that feel stuck or stagnant, and there are parts that could have potential to move in a certain direction, but that for whatever reason there might be certain kinds of resistance right now, as well as speaking to the more kind of the longer term issue of what you mentioned about again the term you used, codependency, and how you've dealt with that just within your own life personally, and how you're addressing that with regard to your relationship with your son, and also dynamics between you and your husband, and just family dynamics, and you mentioned boundaries also. So perhaps depending on if you decide to that you know, we could meet again, which I would certainly like that. Perhaps at a next session, perhaps in 1 week's time, we could discuss one or more of those things more in depth, and just to continue to examine really what drives certain things, kind of keeps them going forward. What are ideas or thoughts about the current situation, and sometimes even elaborating more of a story that becomes like if we want to call it a narrative, for instance. Sometimes it might be, called that, I should bring that term, that a narrative of how things look and how all the pieces fit together, and what are ways in which, given that exact situation, how that could be looked at for what it is and how it is right now, as far as avenues to different things happening, or different ways of, so to speak, rewriting the story or editing parts of the story in a way that might be more helpful, or more even just beneficial in day-to-day life. So those could be some.
The visual of the puzzle pieces sounds really cool. Like, that sounds like something that I would really be able to hold on to, is, yeah. Because I feel like it's a puzzle piece, and I don't even know where to start. Like, I've built the outside, but getting the inside, I'm stuck. So I really like that idea a lot.
Oh, okay. Well, I appreciate your feedback on it. I definitely would like to explore that more if you're open to it, because it sounds like, just given your experience, given your knowledge on just different things that you mentioned, and your own involvement as kind of like a group leader, and different things that you've been involved in for a long time, it sounds like, given the different pieces, that it's a matter of maybe seeing how they're all coming together in that narrative, and then seeing how. So.
That sounds amazing.
Okay. I'm glad to do that. So I thought before we take a break and then come back for the next part of the session, I just wanted to check in to see if there's anything I forgot to ask about, or if there are any particular concerns about what might be happening in these sessions.
No, no, this was really good, very informative, and I like the ideas that you have to move forward with it a lot.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I appreciate your feedback as well. And Right, well then, what we can go ahead and do is, at the end of today's session, we can perhaps make a plan to, set a point in time for next week if that works for you. And then to just kind of continue to explore things a little further.
Okay.
Right. It's very nice to meet with you today.
It's very nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you.